If you want a customizable layered material that blends the layers realistically based on height data and custom masks and is supported in all Unreal Engine 5 versions, you're in the right place. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to use the material I've created so you can speed up your workflow and make better assets and environments. So let's do it. Quick feature review. Before we dive deep into how the material works, let me quickly go over its features. We can control multiple material layers directly inside the material instance. The layers can be blended using height maps, custom masks, or both. In Unreal Engine 5.4 and above, the material is fully set up for nanite tessellation and displacement. The material supports both ORDP and ORM mask textures. Quickly adjust scaling and offset for each layer, or use tri-planar projection if your mesh doesn't have UV setup. Easily fine-tune base color tint, saturation, brightness and contrast, normal intensity and displacement settings from the material instance. The project includes the example level with ready-to-use materials to get you started. You can get this material from the link in the description. The download files. There are two zip files. Each of them contains an Unreal Engine project. The first part of the name is the date of the last update of the asset, and the last part is the Unreal Engine version of the project file. One is made using Unreal Engine 5.0 and one is made using Unreal Engine 5.4. The only difference between them is that the 5.4 version has nanite tessellation and displacement built into it. The 5.0 version can be used with Unreal Engine 5.0, 5.1, 5.2 and 5.3, and the 5.4 version can be used with Unreal Engine 5.4, 5.5 and any version that comes in the future. I'm gonna use the 5.4 version for this video. Create a folder and let's name it layered material. Move the zip file into it, right click on it and extract here. Now let's open the project. The project. When the project opens, by default, the map I've provided is open. These are some material instances I've made while testing the features in the material. Let's first navigate the content browser. In the HOJD folder, there are 4 folders. In Marketplace, Layered Material, you can find the map and the material instances. In Materials, Masters, you can find the master material for the layered material, some material functions, the layer assets, and some default textures. In the Meshes folder, there's a nanite plane. And in Textures, Polyhaven, there are some textures from the Polyhaven website. I'll use them to explain how the material works. The layered material. Now let's actually start working with the material. Go to Materials, Masters, right click on the layered master and create a material instance. I'll name it mi_layered material_video and let's move it to the folder we want. Here it is. In the level, let's select all these meshes and move them out of the way. Add your mesh to the level. I'm gonna use this plane. Let's move it to the center of the board and move it up a little bit. Next, I want to add a mannequin to the level as the scale reference. So click on the add button here, add feature or content pack, and third person is the one we need. Select it and click add to project. Close it, go to content, characters, mannequins, meshes, and let's add the mani mesh. Now as you can see, the plane is too small, so I'm gonna scale it to something like 10. That's better. Now let's go back to the material we created. Here it is, and assign it to the plane. Where did the mani go? Save everything, and let's open the material. Now in material instances, we usually use the parameters that are exposed under the Details tab, but not for layered materials. For layered materials, we use the Layer Parameters tab. So let's click on it, and if you don't have it, you can add it from the window menu. Here it is, Layer Parameters. By default, we only have the background material. So let's click here to open it. First, we should assign a layer asset to it. This is one of the assets that are provided with the project. In the materials folder, masters, there's a layers folder. Let's open it. Here there are two assets. This one is a material layer and this one is a material layer blend. The material layer is used as the layer asset and the material layer blend is used as the blend asset. The background layer only uses the material layer, but the other layers that we're gonna add use both of them. So let's drag the material layer here, open it, and we have all these parameters. Let's start with the textures. Enable all of them. We can enable these two options if the material has a specular and the subsurface scattering texture. The third parameter is to control which type of mask texture is using. Previously, when downloading Quixel materials from Bridge, the mask textures were ORDP. It contained the ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement textures. But now when downloading them from the Fab plugin, the mask texture is ORM, ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic textures. We may have some materials from before and some newly downloaded materials from Fab. We can switch between them with this option. When it's enabled, the material uses ORM, and when it's disabled, the material uses ORDP. By default, it's enabled. That's why we have the ORM texture input here, and as a result, another input for the height or displacement texture. Now, if I disable it, we'll get a metallic texture input and an ORDP texture input. So depending on your texture set, enable whichever of these options that you need. I have ORM texture, so I'm gonna enable this one. Now let's go to HD, Textures, Polyhaven. I'm gonna use the cobblestone as the background layer. So let's open it and start assigning the textures. This one is the mask texture. Pay attention that it's named ARM, but it's the same as ORM, ambient occlusion. This one is the diffuse or the base color, the normal, and the height texture. As you can see, because the plane is nanite and the project and the material are set up for nanite tessellation, we see the displacement. It's too much though. We're gonna fix that in a little bit. If you wanna know how nanite tessellation works and how to enable it for your projects, I have a video for that. Let's go over to parameters and enable all of them. I'll cover tri-planar projection toward the end of the video, so you know exactly when to expect to use it. We can use these three parameters to control the UVs, these parameters to control the base color texture, this one controls the normal strength, and these parameters control the displacement. Let's decrease the texture size to something like 0.1 or 0.12, that's better. Now as you can see, the displacement magnitude is too much. We could control it with the displacement multiplier parameter, but there's a better way for that. Under Details, Material Property Overrides, we have the displacement scaling option. Let's enable and open it. Here we have the magnitude and the center of the displacement. Let's decrease the magnitude to something like 1 or 0.8. That's better. Save the material. And let's go back to layer parameters. This is how the offset UV parameters work. We can add tint to the base color texture. Increase or decrease the saturation and control its brightness and contrast with these two parameters. Let's set the brightness, for example, to 1.3 and the contrast to 1.5. Let's reset them. This one controls the normal strength. This is when it's 0 and this is when it's set to something high like 3. Around 1.5 is good. And these last parameters control the displacement. Displacement multiplier increases and decreases the displacement. And displacement offset moves the whole material. So that's enough for the background layer. Let's start adding other layers to the material. Click here to close the background layer and click here to add a new layer. I'm gonna use the forest ground textures, so let's name it forest ground. Open it, and as you can see, this one has both a layer asset and a blend asset. So let's go back to the layers folder and assign them like this. The material layer goes to the layer asset and the material layer blend goes to the blend asset. Open both of them and I'm gonna start with the textures. Assign the textures like this. And let's set the texture size for this one to 0.08. Here's where the fun begins. We can blend the layers with two methods, using height data, which gives us natural transitions automatically, and using a custom mask. Open the height parameters and enable all of them. By default, each new layer will be added from below. We can use the first option to add it from the top. I'll show you how it works in a little bit. Now all these parameters control how the layers blend based on their height texture. When the transition phase is set to 0, we don't see the current layer. We only see the layers below. But as we start to increase it, the material starts emerging. And as we get to 1, we only see the current layer, which is the forest ground. These black areas are caused because of displacement and virtual shadow maps. If we look away and we look again, they disappear. Let's set the transition phase to 0.5. As you can see, it fills the space between the cobblestones. To better see it, we can increase the height contrast to something like 1. That's better. Now, this is when the transition phase is 0, this is when it's 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 and 0.7. Let's increase the height contrast to something like 1.5 and set the transition phase to 0.6. Now the layers are blending in a better fashion. These other parameters give us more control over how these layers blend with each other. These two control the height texture of this current layer, and these two control the height texture of the bottom layers. Now when we're up close, it looks good, but as we zoom away, there might be some repetition visible. That's because we're using the height texture of the layers to blend them, and the textures might have repetition issues. Now that's where the custom masks come in handy. Let's open it and enable all the parameters. Mask amount controls how much the mask affects the layer. When it's 0, it means that it doesn't affect it at all, and when it's 1, it's fully affecting the layer. Let's set it to 1. For the mask texture, you can use any black and white texture you want. I'll use the Perlin noise from the starter content. So let's search for it and add it. We can already see how it's affecting the material. This is when the mask amount is 0 and this is when it's set to 1. Now we can use these parameters to better control how it looks. We can increase the size to something like 2, the brightness to something like 1.5, and the contrast to something like 2.5 or 3. This one controls the mask texture channel in case your mask is in a specific channel of the texture, and these two offset the mask. Let's actually increase the transition phase to 0.7. Now this is when the mask is set to 0 and this is when the mask amount is set to 1. Again, we can change the mask size or offset it to change the way it looks. You can use any mask texture you want. For example, let's search for logo and use this UI logo texture. Set the size to 1 and the offset to 0, and here's the result. We can also increase the bottom layer height texture brightness to see more of the cobblestones. Let's duplicate this plane here and also add 1 to the end of the name of this material instance and duplicate it. I want to keep this material. Let's assign the second material to this one and continue with this plane. There are also some good noise textures in the engine content. On the top of the content browser, click on All and open the engine folder. Before that, click on Settings and make sure Show Engine Content and Show Plugin Content are turned on. So let's open the engine folder. Here, search for noise and set the filter to texture. As you can see, there are some great noise textures here too. Let's go with this one. Before adding a new layer, let's see how the add layer from top option works. As you can see, the forest ground is being added from beneath and it first fills the cracks and the crevices of the cobblestone. Let's enable this option to see how it looks then. Let's also set the mask amount to 0 for now. Now as we decrease the transition phase, we can see that the forest ground is added to the top of the cobblestones. This can be useful for some materials, so let's disable it. Set the transition phase back to 0.7 and the mask amount to 1. Close the forest ground layer and add a new layer. Let's go to All, remove the filter, content, HD, textures, polyhaven, and for this one I'm gonna use the gray rocks textures. So let's name it gray rocks. Open it, and another way we can assign the layer asset and the blend asset is through here. So click here, and this is the only one available in this project, so let's assign it. Open the layer asset, assign the textures, set the texture size to 0.1 and go over to the blend asset parameters. I'll set the height contrast to 1.5, transition phase to 0.5. Here it is. This is when it's 0 and this is when it's 0.5. Let's also tweak these parameters to get a better result. Open the mask parameters, enable all of them, set the mask amount to 1, and for this one I'm gonna use the Berlin noise. Increase the mask size to 2, the brightness to 1.5 and the contrast to 3. Let's change the size. 2 is fine. Now this is when the mask amount is set to 0 and this is when it's set to 1. Let's actually do one thing. I'm gonna use the Berlin noise for the forest ground and this noise that we used from the engine content for the gray rocks. So let's open it, change this one to the Berlin noise, increase the contrast to 5 and the size to 3 or 1 or 0.5. 1.5 is fine. Let's increase the brightness to, yeah, that's better. A brightness of 2 and a contrast of 3. Now let's go back to the gray rock layer and set it to this one. Set the size to 1. Yeah, that's better. This is when the mask is set to 0 and this is when the mask is set to 1. Let's tweak these parameters until we are happy with the result. That's better. Now if we set the transition phase of this layer to 0, this is the result, and if we set it to 0.5, this is the result. I think that's good. That's enough. Let's save everything and continue. Let's close the gray rocks layer. We can also use the I button next to each layer to hide and unhide it. So for example, let's hide the forest ground, unhide it, and this is if we hide the gray rocks and unhide it. I'm gonna add one more layer. Let's name it snow, and I'm gonna use these snow textures. So let's open it, assign the layer asset and the blend asset, enable all the parameters, and for this one we have both a specular texture and a translucent texture which can be used as the subsurface texture. So let's enable all of this. Assign the textures. This one is the base color, displacement, normal, specular, and SSS. I'll set the size of this one to 0.2 and let's go to the blend asset parameters. Enable the height parameters. Let's set the height contrast to 1 and start increasing the transition phase. That's good. Let's also add the mask texture. And set the mask amount to 1. Use a purling noise here. Set the brightness to 1.5 and the contrast to 3. And increase the mask size to 4. Let's increase the contrast to 5. Yeah, and just like that, now we have a snow. Let's increase the transition phase to 0.6 to have more snow. Now here under parameters, I'm gonna decrease the normal strength to 0.6 or 0.75, and because we have enabled subsurface texture for this one, there's a subsurface scattering color parameter too, and this is what happens if we change it. The default value works fine most of the time. The tri-planar option. Now that we've gone over all of the parameters, let's see how the tri-planar option works. I'm gonna use the tri-planar projection on this model. Let's first assign the material we created earlier to it. As you can see, it doesn't have any UV information. So duplicate the material and assign it to the model, then open it. Let's close this one. Hide all the layers and open the background layer. One of the things about tri-planar projection is that the mesh doesn't need to be unwrapped to be properly textured. Enable tri-planar projection. The texture is too small, so let's set the texture size to 1.2. And as you can see, it's properly textured. Let's also increase the displacement magnitude. So go to details, and from here let's set it to 10 or 8 or 6. 7 is fine. So this is how tri-planar works. It has two types. Cheap tri-planar, which is enabled by default, and expensive tri-planar. Their difference is in the number of texture samples. The expensive one has 3 and the cheap one has 1. So when using it with several textures, the cheap one is really cheaper and has a lot less samplers. For example, this layer has 4 textures. The cheap version has 4 samplers, but the expensive version has 3 samplers per texture, which means it has 12 samplers. So that can be a lot when using other layers as well. Keep that in mind. They look a little different too. The cheap one has this hard edge where the projection changes, but on the expensive one, Let's disable the cheap one to enable the expensive one. You can see that the different projections smoothly blend into each other. We can even control that with this parameter, which controls the transition contrast. So this is if we set it to 4, this is if we set it to 8, 16, 32 and 64. So 4, 64. This parameter is only available with the expensive version. When we enable the cheap version, it goes away. The next option is local space. Right now the textures are being projected in wall space. When we move, rotate and scale it, we can see that it kind of slides through the texture. What if we don't want that and we want the texture to stick to the mesh? Local space does just that. Let's enable it. And now as you can see, the texture is attached to the mesh. Now let's get back to this model and unhide the forest ground layer. Again, it looks bad, so let's open it and enable tri-planar projection. You should also enable the tri-planar projection for the mask texture. So here let's enable it, and now it's fixed. It looks so much better now. Let's also increase the texture size to 8 and the mask texture size to 10. Actually, let's set the texture size to 0.8. That's better. Now we should do the same for the other two layers. If you want to save time, build better environments, and have flexible materials ready for any Unreal Engine 5 version, check out the download link in the description below. And that's it. Click here for more Unreal stuff, and thank you so much for watching. Massive shout out to my patrons for making this possible. Like this video, subscribe, and join our communities. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. So, see you in the next one.